Welcome to the Finance Committee meeting of October 10th. Before we get started, I'd just like to remind everyone that in accordance with open meeting law, we are recording tonight's meeting, and it's being broadcast over Lunenburg Public Access. So with that, I'll call our meeting to order. I have 7:03. First order of business is to review our minutes from 8:22. Has everyone had a chance to review our minutes?
Yep. Yes.
Yes.
Motion to accept them?
Yeah. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Great, thank you. The next order of business this evening is a presentation from the Lunenburg School Building Committee and a review of the preliminary cost estimates. And I believe Mike Mackin, chair of the committee, will start that part of the presentation off.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the rest of the Finance Committee for the opportunity to present to you tonight. What we have is our most up-to-date information regarding the proposed middle high school project. As you're undoubtedly familiar, the Lunenburg School Building Committee was empowered as a result of the vote last year of the town to engage in a feasibility and schematic design with the MSBA. We have, at this juncture, completed the feasibility and the schematic design and cost estimate. It has been submitted to the it's been approved by the School Building Committee and been sent to the MSBA. As part of that approval process, the School Building Committee authorized a working group to look at the current schematic design and cost estimate and see if there are areas of efficiencies in the design or cost reductions in the potential for cost reductions in the project. It's part of our due diligence as the School Building Committee to ensure that we're providing the most cost-effective, most educationally sound building. And we want to be assured that we can deliver that, and to assure the public that, as oftentimes you hear for some public projects in town, this is not a Taj Mahal. With that, I'd like to introduce the superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Mackin. We have some other individuals in the audience today who are going to help with that this presentation. Mr. Mackin will actually be part of the presentation, as well as from Jocelyn Lesser and Associates, who serve as our owner's project managers. We have Greg Cohan and also Christine DePalma, and Charlie Hay, who's the principal designer and the architect on the project, is here. And so the agenda for today's presentation is to explain the project need and the educational vision, to familiarize you with the process and the timelines, to review preliminary options and the analysis of those options, and to provide an overview of the preferred 6 through 12 new construction option as developed through the schematic design phase. And after this PowerPoint presentation, we will also have the financials presented to you by the OPM. The master plan and feasibility study completed by DRA in 2007 concluded that Lunenburg High School had significant educational space needs and accreditation issues. The study cited undersized science labs, an undersized library, limited technology, and poor accessibility as significant concerns. Additionally, after an on-site review, a report by the visiting team of the New England Association of Schools and Colleges stated that the building's physical plant did not meet the basic expectations for a current-day school facility. The building is unable to support the demands of teaching and learning in the 21st century. As a result, the school was placed in warning status by the association. In that status, the school is required to document progress towards addressing these facility concerns on an annual basis, and failing to do so may result in the loss of accreditation. Loss of accreditation adversely impact college admissions for students, and research also indicates that property values and bond ratings of communities are negatively impacted when a school loses accreditation. The DRA study reported that the basic building envelope for the high school needed replacement. As a result of the poor condition of the walls, windows, and roof of the building, there are leaks, the classrooms are drafty, and heating costs are high. The settling of the structural concrete floor slab is also cited as causing walls to crack and walls to come loose. The lower level of the high school has groundwater infiltration, as seen in the photo. Much of the plumbing and electrical infrastructure is at the end of its useful life. The study concluded that in the existing systems, it would be difficult to expand or improve without wholesale replacement. There is a lot of asbestos-containing material in the school. There are currently 579 students attending Lunenburg High School. The building as it currently exists is 20,000 square feet short of MSBA standards for a 9 through 12 high school with 445 students. The size of the average classrooms currently at Lunenburg High School are marginal when compared with the MSBA standards, and the science classrooms are significantly undersized. Despite the efforts of our talented and creative faculty, educational opportunities are limited by the facility, particularly in the areas of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, as well as in the arts. There are few spaces of sufficient size for hands-on, project-based learning, and the current facility lacks sufficient spaces for counseling, health, and an individual or small group instruction. District-wide, we are at or over capacity in 2 of our 3 buildings. After completion of 2 studies on regionalization, as well as a special study by an advisory group, the school committee recommended in 2011 to move to a more sustainable 3-building configuration to provide a developmentally appropriate, high-quality, and fiscally sustainable educational program to the children of Lunenburg. A co-located middle high school for grades 6 through 12 was recommended to improve student learning outcomes by providing students at all levels with facilities that support best practices in teaching and learning. With this proposed building project, our district configuration would move from Lunenburg High School, which is currently serving 8th through 12th grade, to a 6th through 12 configuration. Turkey Hill Middle School, which currently serves students in grades 4 through 7, would move to a 3 through 5 building. And Lunenburg Primary School, currently serving pre-K through grade 3, would move to a pre-K through 2 configuration. Mr. Macken's going to talk next about the collaborative process utilized up to this point.
We have put it as our task to have an open and collaborative process so that as we develop the project, we ensure that people are kept informed, that there's opportunities for feedback, there's opportunities for questions, there's opportunities for people to help us really to formulate the project needs. And through that we have had meetings, well, as you can see, over 40 meetings, and to such groups as we started with a visioning session with parents, teachers, and administrators. We had meetings between the design staff and our educators. We've had meetings with the MSBA. We have thus far met with the Board of Selectmen, with the Planning Board, and with the Capital Planning Committee. We have, in addition, attended all of the school open houses to inform the parents of the projects and to solicit any questions or comments that they have on the project. We've also just yesterday, we were over at the Eagle House talking with the seniors about the project. And we actually got some very positive feedback, so that was a very important stop. And we'll be back. We intend to have more, and we'll talk a little bit more about those later. We're planning on a series of public forums. The first one will be on October the 30th at the high school at 7 p.m. We will have additional forums. We're setting up one, you'll see later on in our final schedule, where it will just be an open coffee at the library on a Saturday, so people can just stop in and meet with the building committee and ask questions and have their questions answered. We're hoping that when we are done with this full process, that there will be very few people with questions at town meeting, because they'll be fully informed. As you'll also see later, we also have a website and a Facebook page, and I encourage people to bookmark the website and like us on Facebook. We're up to 228 likes. I would love to see us at 250 by tomorrow, but and of course we've had several meetings with the Massachusetts School Building Authority. We are now having a working group that's working with the design team to see if there's any potential for cost savings in the project. And of course, we've also met with all the town regulatory officials. We've had meetings with all the regulatory officials to ensure that when we are, through with the project, that we've made sure that we've gone through, all the necessary processes within town. So here's the milestone schedule, and that's Greg. Are you going to go through that? Okay, come on up. This is Greg Cohan, owner project manager.
Hi. This is the milestone schedule currently that we're working to, and pardon me if I got my glasses, so I've got to get a little closer to see it, unless you have that handout, if I could borrow. Thank you. We started the program development in spring of 2013. We're currently, and then in 418 we had the schematic design, so we're fairly ambitious in going through the designs through this stuff. In 731 we got approval from the MSBA for the preferred schematic design, which started the estimating process. So at this moment we got the preferred schematic design estimate. It's a whole complete package, which you'll see later. We got that into the MSBA on 10/3. The next big milestone for them is 11/20, where the board of the MSBA will come back for approval of the project. Typically what they'll do before the 11/20 is they'll give us a call to the district. We'll go in and meet with them, and informally they'll so there's no surprises. They're very good about that, telling us some of their concerns, if there's any more additional information required to meet that. At that point, we've put into the milestone schedule the local funding that we've thought the first and the second week, once we have the number established for the project, then that would be presented for a vote by the public. From that point, if it was accepted, we would go right into design development drawings. And then we would go to bid. That would take it all the way through 9/24 to the 14th, 2014, pardon me, September 2014. From that point, typically in September, we usually like 3 to 4 weeks, probably 3 weeks, we would work with the CM at risk, and he would develop a guaranteed maximum price for the project. That's what we would spend. At that point, construction could begin in November of 2014. Substantial completion of the building would be in June of 2016, and school would open in September of 2016. When the new school opens, then the work would commence on the demolition of the old school in the fall of 2016, some field work and everything, so we would project spring of 2017 project complete. So that's a little higher look at some of the milestones. And I'm going to introduce Charlie Hayes from TAPE, one of the principals and the designer.
Good evening. Delighted to be here, and I will do this quickly. The process began with a series of options being studied, and we've actually been at this for quite a while. I was thinking one of the first meetings was snowed out. So, you know, we've been doing this for 8 months or something. So it's been a very comprehensive process, but obviously developing the options initially during the feasibility study was important to come to the right conclusion. And clearly the basis of this whole program had to be vetted. So the options we looked through, obviously there's the possibility of doing nothing, but clearly the community engaged in this process to do something. And doing nothing, frankly, puts you in the same place you have now, which is an aging building that doesn't meet code, that doesn't meet 21st century educational standards, and has significant costs both to operate and in terms of deferred maintenance. Another option would be to simply renovate the building as is, and that is really just would be to bring the systems up to speed. It would be to try to bring it into some reasonable code compliance. That would not solve any educational issues. It would not solve capacity issues that you have in the community, as the superintendent has mentioned. And it would not be reimbursed by the state, so you'd receive no contribution from the MSBA. So that option was quickly taken off the table too, is really putting good money after bad. There is the possibility you could take your high school, renovate it, and add on to it to at least bring it to a capacity for 9 through 12, but it doesn't ultimately remove the constraints that are there for the building, which is that it's a difficult building to work with. It has a lot of low ceilings. It has a lot of different levels. It has a very circuitous circulation path. And none of those problems would be solved. So that was not considered to be the most cost-effective or responsible option. And fundamentally, this got to the issue of what should grade capacity be. And as the superintendent mentioned, not only had you already had a realignment committee make a recommendation that 6 through 12 made sense for the community, you are essentially now as a district over capacity in some of your schools because you've taken a facility offline. So as a 3-school system right now, you are over capacity and at capacity with your schools. So part of this process is really about figuring out the best way to move forward and the most efficient way to move forward for all your facilities. And ultimately, after looking at the possibility of renovating and doing a large addition at the site versus doing a new school at the site for 6 through 12, if the decision was made to go to a 6 through 12 project, there's really not a lot of difference in cost between a new building and a renovated and added building. And the reason for that, and this is absolutely consistent through every project we've done in every district we've worked in, in the end, it turns out that doing a new building from scratch is essentially really a very similar cost, and in part because you don't have to deal with swing space for your students. You don't have to deal with the remarkable disruption to your students during construction in an occupied building or removing them to a different location during construction. And so ultimately the preferred option of the committee was to complete a new 6 through 12 facility on your existing site. So the next slide shows a kind of matrix that shows sort of the pros of all of the different options, and I won't take any more time, but obviously the far right column indicates that the most cost-effective and best option for the community in terms of ongoing and long-term maintenance costs, in terms of capacity, and in terms of current construction disruption, was to do a new school on your existing site. So what we have proposed is a new school on what is now the existing grass football fields next to the turf football field. So if you look, there's the proposed new building, there's the existing turf field, there's the Turkey Hill Middle School, that's Oak Ave, that's Mass Ave down there. Your existing high school is here. And this program has a new entrance off of Oak Ave. It has a existing entrance off of Mass Ave. And it has pickup and drop off for buses and for automobiles. It has dedicated student parking separate. It has resurfaced tennis courts and a new outdoor basketball court, and it has 3 new fields as part of the site development. If we go to the next slide, this shows you an idea of how the floor plan might look. The building is still under design. It's still subject to change, but this gives you a sense of some of the preliminary thinking, which is effectively to have a high school wing and a middle school wing, and then really a community building. And the community building has theater, gymnasium, locker rooms, cafeteria, and an auditorium for somewhere between 550 and 600 people. The middle school is its own distinct academic environment. The high school is its own distinct academic environment, and they share a lot of the core programs, computer labs, art, music. Those kind of classrooms, they come together. There's a shared administration in the front. There's a community entrance, which will be the public entrance. There's also separate high school and middle school entrances for pickup and drop off at the beginning of the day and the end of the day. The next slide shows you kind of a concept around how this thing would be built in phase. There's always concerns about building on an existing school site, but you're very lucky, remarkably lucky in Lunenburg, to have a situation where we can create a dedicated construction entrance off of Oak Ave, and we can basically take the section of site where the new building is going and demarcate that off with fencing and allow your ongoing high school operations to really operate without disruption during construction. The one issue, of course, is you will lose 2 grass fields. The superintendent has been already working on how to accommodate home games and away games, recreational use. But beyond that, it should be a fairly easy as any construction project can be, a fairly easy site to manage in terms of how the building is built next to an active and occupied school. And the other really great thing is that your existing turf field, which is here, will remain operational during construction, which is terrific, because at least you'll have one good turf field too, not a grass field, which is terrific, which can take a lot more use. So there's a lot of benefits to the site in terms of the construction phasing. Just some quick images of the building. You can see here, this is a bus pickup and drop off, which will accommodate 10 buses stacked. There's adequate stacking for cars for pickup and drop off during the day. This picture shows an aerial view showing you the high school wing in the front, the middle school wing in the back, that community building I talked about to the left, the turf field down there beyond all that. There's also a greenhouse to replace the existing greenhouse at the high school because of your very successful and robust horticulture program at the school, which is really exciting and interesting and unique to Lunenburg, and I think it's important to the educators to maintain it. And then this is an image sort of the front of the school, showing you a kind of a courtyard area and the classroom wing to your right for the high school. This shows you kind of an entry with a flag and the cafeteria in the front door coming in. This shows you from the back, looking back up at the Media Center library and the greenhouse to your left. And you can see you're looking up the hill. This will be a building on a hill. because, as you know, the existing football fields are higher than where the existing high school is, and it will sit up there. And if you're on the high school or down on the new, if you're in the new fields where the old high school was, you're going to be looking up at it, which I think is going to be kind of a nice feature, actually. And then coming around, you see the end of the middle school classroom wing and kind of a courtyard here to the right. So again, these are conceptual views only. The real design work continues and will continue into the next phase, obviously, once the project receives approval. And then we'll really develop the final kind of configuration and appearance of the building, but it gives you kind of a conceptual view of what it might be like in the future. So that's where we are with the design, and that was kind of a quick overview of the process we went through to get from there to here. Does anyone want to talk about this or piece or not? This.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, there are several ways that folks at home who are listening can stay connected to the project. We do have a website, as I mentioned earlier. It's if you have trouble getting to it, just go out to the Lunenburg School and click on the School Building Committee, and you'll get to our website. We've just added some new information and some new features. You can actually go to the designs, and now you can zoom in on them. You can actually, go room to room and, identify each of the spaces. So that was a recent feature that we've added. In addition, we have a listing of our public forums coming up, and those are listed on the site. You can also follow us on Twitter, which is twitter.com, MSHSBLDG Project, and we have a Facebook page. We can also be reached through buildingproject@lunenburgonline.com, or you can call Mary Lanning, the superintendent's office, at 978-582-4100, extension 211. Questions at this point?
Just a quick question. I'm going to assume that in a lot of the discussion, any high school or middle school safety, I'm going to assume that that's all upgraded as well in terms of school safety and.
Well, the building itself is going to have its own whole set of security systems in terms of basically, when the school is in operation, the only entrance that's accessible to the public will be a single entrance by the administration offices, by the principal's office. And people actually, it's a two-door system, much as we've retrofitted the high school for right now. You have to be buzzed into one and then sign in and then buzzed into the next one. So that's part of it. There's also, we understand that the specs currently contain our ability to video camera large spaces like the cafeteria, the gym, hallways, so that we'll also be able to monitor live feed to the main office through these cameras. Is that?
Yeah, no, I was just basically, I was assuming that you had taken the opportunity to work those things in.
The current design shows two separate entrances for the middle school and the high school. And as I said, these two separate wings. The single cafeteria, the way that they've worked it out is they'll just stack the lunches so that you'll have 6 and 7 or 8, 9, so that there's appropriate separation in terms of age groups.
And Mike, if I'm not mistaken, the gymnasium will also have a divider. So that can be broken into different spaces.
Absolutely.
One of the things about this design with a co-located middle school, high school, and it's not specific to your question of security, but around how we created a building that is developmentally appropriate. In the locker rooms, there are separate locker rooms for the middle school boys and girls versus the high school boys and girls. So those things have been taken into account while maximizing this co-location of those core physical spaces. The current high school does have all the security aspects aspects that this school has, but this school would be enhanced beyond. And you know, at the middle school, we don't have the capacity because of the design of the building right now to have that. We have a controlled entrance, but we don't have that area that you're contained in before you can gain entrance to the rest of the building. So indeed, all of those aspects of current day security for buildings has been incorporated into the design.
Any other questions with the overview of the project? We'll get into the cost in just a minute. Okay.
right.
What's the best way to get at the cost? I shared with the members of the committee the spreadsheets that this.
Just to read down through it, Mark.
Okay.
We don't really have a spreadsheet for a slide for it. But
Perhaps we can start.
everybody walk down through it.
Perhaps we can start with the summary sheet.
Sure.
I just was looking on the computer, but that's all right. No, don't worry.
You can borrow mine.
Put it in my-
I'm familiar with it.
I'll
We
share
can
it with
share.
you. You guys can share it.
Okay.
They're printing them all out, though. Yeah, I know. That's why I didn't do it.
All right, well, what you have in front of you is a schematic design, the total project budget summary. And this is a result of the estimation done between the architect's estimator, TAPE's estimator is PM&C, and the contractor on the job is Shawmut Design, who has been hired for the pre-construction work, which involves this. Currently, we're funded for $750,000, which is known as the feasibility study, which we're in right now. But we're only going to end up spending $619,057 on that. If you look down again, and this, we could go into more detail and get through it, but this is the summary. So for the administration costs, which includes the OPM, for DD through closeout, that was 1.924. And if I'm going too fast, stop me. But I'm going again off the summary sheet. The next one is the architecture and engineering. And again, that's DD, which is design development through closeout. That's at $5.175 million. CM at risk construction services, if we took that through design development through closeout, they're going to spend $160,000 for that. Construction costs, again, this is a reconciled estimate, but this is the PM&C we have to carry for the MSBA's sake. We carry the architectural estimate. Their estimated carries, so that's $60,261,632. Again, what's not included and what's excluded by the MSBA, we've listed as the greenhouse. There's a request by the school to build a greenhouse. That would be the town share, so that's $345,000 for that. Miscellaneous project costs is $170,000. What that involves is utilities, testing, moving services and stuff. That was estimated at $170,000. Furnishings and educational technology, that's a number you get from the MSBA, so it's a factor of the amount of students times $1,200 per student. So that's a combination of both furnishings and educational. So that's at $1.968 million.
And Greg, if I'm not mistaken, each of those is $1,200 per student, so it's $1,200 for furnishings and $1,200 for technology.
Correct, we just combined them, which again, you'll see the backup on that other sheet as we go through. Potentially eligible construction contingency, we carried at 5%, so that's at $3 million, 13. Potential eligible owner soft cost contingency, we carried it to the 1%, so that's $600,000. So that gives you a total project budget of $74,235,771. That's construction and all hard and soft costs, total construction. Maximum MSBA grant, and again, you'll see that on the backup sheet, that's at $36,238,758, and the minimum town share at this point, we're calling $37,997,013. Below on the summary sheet again is the project metrics, design enrollment of 820 students, gross floor area, square foot is 167, and what that comes out to is about 360 per square foot.
And for the benefit of the committee, before we move into some of the details, these are the preliminary estimates. We're continuing to study these estimates in detail, get down into some of the very specific elements of what's in the project and what some of the choices are that we have to try and lower that cost.
That's correct, Mark. So this was the basis of the first round of estimates, reconciled, and we're taking the time as a working group to go through and, again, study all the costs.
Right. And the architect, the construction manager, and the estimators have all collaborated on a couple of rounds of value engineering. Could one of you comment about the value engineering process, maybe Charlie?
Well, generally what we do is the schematic design drawings get given to our estimator, as Greg just mentioned, as well as the construction manager. They go away and separately prepare complete estimates. We then bring them back together along with Jocelyn Lesser and the architect to go through the estimates and see where we have areas of agreement and areas of disagreement, and try to hammer out kind of a consistent approach in terms of scope. Once there's an agreement to scope, in other words, you say it's this big and I say it's this big, okay, we agree. Then there is quite a robust, 6-hour, 8-hour long meeting in which we go through line by line and look at areas where there's possibility of savings, areas where somebody may appear to be low. I mean, what we're trying to do is get to an accurate number, not just an artificial number. So in some cases, we're talking about how to, do we think, and the estimator keeps very active market data. They're probably the preeminent estimator of public schools in the state. They have a lot of feedback. They know where the market is. So we do that. Then this issue of value engineering is really to look at where we might find savings. So we go through looking for areas where we think there may be things that are in the design that would be nice to have, but we may not have to have them. The estimate then gets modified relative to those issues, and then the engineers get involved and look at their scope to make sure they think it's accurate. And then we do multiple rounds of this, and those can get quite detailed. We also can look at the cost in a global, larger sense and say, well, if the building was slightly different, would it make an impact? So we're going through that exercise as well. So I think it has been quite a robust process so far, and it's ongoing. Does that kind of answer the question? Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Okay.
Would you like to walk through this form then, Mark? I think you'll see that the summary sheet ties to some of the baselines that are in here. I'd be happy to walk through each one, how we arrived at the numbers, or if you prefer time constraints, we could go to the third page and I can walk you through the summary of where it is. But I think it'd be helpful for the board to know on how we reached at some of the reimbursement rates and where we are with that data.
I think.
But I just wanted to say this form is part of the submittal that goes to the MSBA.
Right.
So this is for a preferred schematic, excuse me. So this form is right out of what's known as their modular 4 that goes in, and this data that you're looking at is exactly what they see. And the yellow columns, which I think you have on there, that's just their way of identifying that, and some of these calculations are done on their spreadsheet for it.
I would ask, could you just explain the columns?
I can.
Thank you.
So the first column, again, is the description of everything that for the estimate. Second one is the estimated budget. We put in these numbers on that next column from the basis of total facilities grant or otherwise ineligible. The yellow on that's their calculations on the sheet. You'll see that again on the second sheet. Basis of estimated total facilities grant, same thing, that's the basis of some of their calculations. And again, the third sheet is just, again, a total of some of those. So what we did was, again, as Charlie just explained, so we went through what you saw, and initially on the summary sheet is we did an estimate with everyone, and we came up with the estimates for each one of these particular tasks, put them in, does the calculations, and then as you work your way down, it starts to develop. It's intuitive. It starts to develop how the grants work and what you will end up with construction costs, as well as what the MSBA will fund. So similar to what I went through a little earlier, you would see like the feasibility study agreement, we have a number of $619,000 for it. We were approved by the MSB for $750,000. We didn't need all that money. Came down again, and if you looked at the owner's project management fee, again, that ties back over to the summary sheet. Those are all the numbers on each one of the phases of that job. So that job, for instance, the OPM is split up into design development, construction docs, there's bidding, there's construction administration, there's closeout, there's numbers put to that. There's some money in for advertising. And the numbers that we typically put in this, that's a basis of what we see as our role and basically what the average is. We do a lot of schools, so these numbers are atypical. And in fact, I think to make some of these numbers work, we had lowered some of these numbers. Same thing for architecture and engineering. Again, they tie back over to the summary sheet. So you'll see for construction development, $717,750 is the fee for that phase, which gave you a total of $4,785,000. And then there's some other additional fees that go into play for the architecture and the engineering. So you have other reimbursable costs for $15,000, $150,000 could be a possible fee for hazardous waste. Geotech, geoengineering, $175,000, and again, that total comes back over to your summary sheet of $5.175 million. Pre-construction services, again, that's the extent of Shawmut's contract. They're authorized to spend up to $160 in certain phases, so we carry the $160 through that. And then you get into the construction costs, and again, these are the reconciled numbers, but these are the numbers that are carried by the architect's estimator, which is PM&C. And you can go down through, and they're broken up into the format that shows a shell, interior services, and again, I can walk down through, but you'll end up with a subtotal of $48 million. Then you add in some of the bonds, the general conditions, the insurance. That's where we arrived at, similar to the summary sheet, the $60,261,000.
Greg, could you just take a minute and explain some of the excluded items?
Yeah, I would like to hear that. That'd be great.
Yep.
Okay. Well, again, the yellow indicates what the MSB takes out as a percentage mark. So when you plug in that number, that's what you end up getting for an exclusion on that. So
What I was looking for was an explanation of what causes these items to be excluded. So, for example, the asbestos abatement is something that's not reimbursable, and that's why it's excluded.
Yes.
Certainly.
So we have to pay for the asbestos abatement.
That's
as
for
an
floor
example.
tile. So what the MSBA says is every school is a bit different throughout the state. Some school systems take it out, some don't, so they carry an exclusion number, and they say they just don't pay for it. Some are proactive, some aren't, some wait for construction. So that exclusion is the total value of the 241. So that was an estimated cost to remove the flooring material, the VCT in the school. That's just completely excluded. So we pull that value right out. Pardon? Correct.
So, as a follow-up to that, is there any other source of funding to help us defray the cost of that asbestos removal? Not necessarily SBA.
No, I don't think there is.
Okay.
No, that strictly comes right out of the district's share. If there's another agency, if that's what you asked me, that would fund something like that, there isn't.
Okay.
That's why, again, I think they just take that general exclusion, maybe there is things a town can do to get that paid for, but they have that process, so they just take that money right out of it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And then walking down, we listed alternatives. So the greenhouse, again, they would not fund that, so we listed that as an exclusion. So we estimated that at $345,000. The other thing they exclude is utility costs or utility company fees if there's electrical fees. So we calculated the $25,000. We felt that was a pretty good number to pull on that one. Again, moving on to page 3, other project costs, that's mailing, moving costs. They do not pay for moving. So if you were moving some of the furniture from the existing school into the new one, in this case, I think if we built this new school, you would have all new furniture. That would be put in the bids anyhow. They would move it in. But if you have other stuff you wanted to move over, the MSBA won't pay for that. So that was the $25,000 for that one too. We tried to keep that one a little lower because, again, that comes out of the town share. Typically, that could be higher if you bring in a lot of stuff from another school. Then again, I think this ties back again to your question, Mark. That's the $1.9 million for FF&E. So that is your furnishings at $984,000 and your computer equipment at $984,000. So that's a reimbursable cost for the so much per student.
Can I ask a question on that?
Sure.
So the equipment furnishings, it's everything that we need for the school, auditorium, if we need speakers, all that stuff.
That would be in the base bid. So the way to look at it is when you build a building, there's hard costs and there's soft costs. The easy way to explain it is take the building, turn it upside down, shake it. What falls out is typically a soft cost. Hard costs, if you were building the building, you would put the speakers in, you would put the theater seating in, that would be included. This would be the desks, the chairs for the students, it would be PCs and stuff like that. So that brings you down to $70,622,000 for a total project budget based on that. And then you have to walk down through the summary, which again, we should just walk through. And I wanted to just call your attention to the column on the right. So what the MSBA did is when we initially started the process, they assigned a reimbursable rate at 53.53 points. The district was able to achieve a higher rate of another 4.72 points for the following reasons. You got 1.72 points for maintenance because you've done a very good job in your schools in town. They awarded that. That was very high for a district to get. Typically, we only see 1 point, so that's a credit to Lunenburg for taking care of schools. If you use a CM at risk process, you got another 1 point for it. And then because we're building an energy efficient school or a green school, they award you 2 points for that too. So that added up again up to the 4.72, which you gave a total reimbursement of $58.25 from the MSBA. And again, board authorization, we can walk down through the summary sheet if that helps. Where we are? Sure.
I had one more question on the model school one. We did not take advantage of that. Is there some reason for that, or could you explain the reason for that?
There's a, go ahead.
The MSBA actually invites school districts to participate in model schools, and they have been doing it few to none. They are trying to maximize their funding, and if they're doing model schools, they're giving extra points for the model school. We, of course, were very much interested in the model school. We were not invited to participate in model school by the MSBA.
Thank you.
Terry, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just curious because that the total didn't walk back to the summary sheet, and I wasn't sure why of the last column. The
Pardon?
34 million doesn't appear on the summary sheet, so I wasn't sure if there was a reason for that.
Doesn't appear on the summary sheet.
That's correct.
Right. No, there isn't a reason. It's just this was given as a summary, but this is a little more detail to it. So
Okay.
again, I'll walk down through this. So again, if you look at the board authorization, so you have a design enrollment of 820. You have a gross square footage area of 167. That gives you the project cost at the 7622. The exclusions above, again in the yellow, was the 12,023. That comes off. Third-party funding, there isn't any. So that gives you a basis of total facilities grants of the 58,599, 379, a reimbursable rate of the 5825, and that gives you the 34,134. It ties right there. So then if you drop down again to the next box, that's the potential eligible construction contingency is worth the $3,013,013. As we showed on the other form, $600,000 for the owner's contingency. That gives you a potential contingency of 3.613. Reimbursement rate again of 5825. Potential additional contingency grant funds of the 2.1. That gives you a maximum total facility of 36,238. Total project budget then is added in. That's at the 74 million. And that calculates out the total share to the district at 37,997,012, which ties again back over to the summary sheet. A lot of numbers.
A lot of numbers and a fairly complex formula that the MSBA uses to factor in what's reimbursable, what's excluded from reimbursement, calculate their share, then you have to calculate our share from what's remaining.
Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. And any other questions for Greg?
I had one question. Under the building site work portion, an excluded expenditure of a little over $2 million for scope excluded site cost, what would that consist of? What could that consist of?
How they exclude site work is they just take a cap to it so that they only pay a certain portion of it. Then the rest is on the district. And again, it's under the same philosophy as the VAT and other things. Other schools, they just maintain that cap. Anything above that, if a school desires to build a artificial turf field or stuff like that, then that's out of their district. So they just blend all that in at the 8%.
If you're looking for specifically what that work represents, it would be the fields, because we're taking over the existing 2 football fields to build the new, the game field and the practice field, plus the soccer field in the back is where the new school is going to be constructed. So the site work to replace those is part of that number, and that's not something the MSBA pays for. They have a set cap. Once you're done with that, that's yours, and they do that to all districts.
And under that work that you're talking about would be under site improvements?
Yes.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Okay, and then just so that I don't want to assume, so could you define contingency, please?
Contingency is an owner's contingency, for instance, is a little different. That's money you reserved if you want to do some additional things to the building, the fields and stuff, so you reserved amount of money. So as you march down through the process, and again, this is early on, this is schematic design, as well as what you may not see in here too as we take a little escalation. But contingency is just money reserved as you get through the process. When you get to the point where you have a defined set of drawings, an accurate cost estimate, and then you go to the contractor for GMP, that contingency could be reduced as well. So it's through the process. You're reserving money for escalation, additional design work and stuff. So it's just a little bit of a reserve.
Okay, thank you.
And then that gets finalized as you get to construction. And when you develop a guaranteed maximum price with a contractor, that money gets locked at that point. Anything else?
So it's basically a hedge against the estimates.
It is. And again, I think as we discussed earlier today, as far as costs, we carried a little bit of an escalation because you're seeing in the marketplace right now that costs are going up. And it's fair to say that a lot of contractors were stung by 2008, 2009. They lost money on jobs. Prices were good at that point, but now it's also somewhat shrunk the market. So the availability of subcontractors aren't there. So you carry a little bit of an escalation to assume, just so we can kind of stay on budget and not assume that's just the number.
So would that be something like if, as they undertook the site prep, they ran into ledge and had to do blasting?
Exactly.
Okay.
Right. That's that little bit of hedge in case you run into things. And then, and again, early on in a process, sometimes you carry a design contingency if there's a scope increase of stuff. But as you get closer to the actual day you build something, those numbers reduce. Pardon?
There's the construction contingency that's saved for the.
Yeah. Yeah. But we work with that number through this process.
Right, and I guess that question.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that for the folks at home, please?
Go ahead, Charlie.
Into the mic.
And what was the question again?
No, Charlie, I'm
Charlie
looking for
threw me
Charlie's
off, so-
comment.
What was your comment,
Is this
Charlie?
on? My comment was simply that there's the contingency that Greg is talking about, which is really a design and escalation contingency, which is effectively absorbed by the final bid number. By the time you get to bid, that's gone. However, there's also a 5% construction contingency, which is a complete set-aside that's associated with, as you mentioned, the things that occur during construction. So hidden conditions, whatever they may be. So there is a quite a significant contingency associated with construction that's reserved.
Thank you.
Okay.
And now, Tara, your question.
Just to, so by the time we go to town meeting, then the contingency that's still on the books is going to be the 5%, or it will also be these contingencies as well?
I think by the time we go to town meeting, we would have defined the actual number. This
Okay.
was, again, preliminary, so this is the schematic, but we will, again,
Okay.
that'll be better defined.
Okay.
Okay. Kerry gave us a handout here. By the way, thank you very much. That was great. Do we have other questions from the public or comments? If not, I would ask town manager to talk to us a little bit about the debt exclusion that we'll be looking at, the debt service, and the potential impact on the average taxpayer.
So when we consider financing this project, because it's a school project, we have the ability to borrow up to 30 years. Most public projects you borrow up to 20 years, but with school projects you can borrow up to 30 years. And also with school projects you have a choice in the way you finance the project. Typically for public projects we do a level principal financing, which means at the beginning of the repayment period you're paying a much higher, making a higher payment in the earlier years, and it's being paid off. As it's being paid off, the annual payment is lower. But with school projects, because they are very large projects, state law does allow you to do a level payment bond issue. So what we pay, what the town would pay, is very similar to what your mortgage would be, where you're paying the same amount year after year after year. And that allows you to have some predictability in the payment. So obviously we would be looking at a level payment here, but we can look at either 20 or 30 years. And I've been asked the question, who gets to decide how this is financed? And the decision on how this is financed is a decision by law that's made by the Board of Selectmen and the town treasurer, obviously with input, but that's who makes the ultimate decision. So I think what I will do is, and I'll tell you which page. I think people probably just want to know how much it's going to cost, and we can work backwards. So why don't we go to page 7, or the last page in the first packet. So I put together a table that says, how does the proposed school building project impact me? And this is for a 30-year term. And we can talk about 20-year terms after, but for a 30-year term, what I've done here is the average assessed valuation is about $248,000, but I've broken out the number of homes in each of the categories in increments of $50,000. So for the averaged assessed home for a 30-year term, we're looking at approximately, this has $530,000 because this assumption is $250,000. So about $530, again on page 7, for the average assessed home for a 30-year term. We've had to make some assumptions on interest rates, when we would permanently finance this. All of this information assumed that we would do, that the project would be permanently financed in 2015. That's at least a year early right now. We probably would do 2 different bond issues for this project because of the length, the duration of the construction. And we would be looking to take advantage of interest rates. So we assume interest rates in the nearer term are going to be lower. And that's another reason why we would look to be separating this. But we certainly don't want to wait until the project's finished and do one bond issue, because then we're borrowing and paying interest costs to borrow money, but not paying back any principal. So that's going to increase the cost to the taxpayer. But we have had to make some assumptions. So if you look at this one table, I've made a note on the side that about 60% of the households in Lunenburg, if we finance this project for 30 years, would pay $530 annually or less. So on a monthly basis, that's $44. Obviously, we don't send out tax bills monthly, we do quarterly, but a lot of people like to think about things in terms of what it would cost a month. So it would be about $44 per month for about 60% of the residents in town. Are there any questions on that? No.
None.
Okay, I was waiting. And then if you go to page 12, which is the last page in the second handout, this is what the impact would be if we borrowed over 20 years. So if we were to borrow this same amount over 20 instead of 30 years, the cost to the average household would be about $625 annually. And again, that same, almost 60% of the households in town would be paying $625 annually, or about $52 monthly for this project.
Or less.
Or less, or less. And the reason why I'm throwing 20 out there is if you look on, well, let's see. If you go to the green sheet, which is page 5, this is the detail on what a 30-year borrowing would look like, and you can see what we'd pay annually in debt service payments. But if we borrowed for 30 years, we would be paying $13 million more in interest costs than if we borrowed for 20 years. So obviously it's easier on the pocketbook if you go for 30 years, but you're paying $13 million more in interest, which is significant, and I think it's something that should be taken into consideration when the decision is made on whether to go 20 or 30 years on this project. it's very similar to your mortgage. When you signed the papers on your mortgage and you bought your home, and then you saw what, if you just made your payments on your 30-year mortgage, and all of a sudden your $300,000 home cost you $1 million. You know, it's the same thing here, but on a much larger scale, because we're talking about $38 million.
So the decision on term being made by the Board of Selectmen and the Treasurer by law, when does that decision get made? Before or after a vote by the town?
Well, it doesn't, by law, it doesn't have to be made until you're actually going out to market when you're putting everything together. Now, that doesn't mean there can't be a discussion and decision before, but that would be up to the board. I would imagine that discussion is going to happen sooner rather than later, and I have a selectman approaching the podium, so I'll hand the mic over to him.
Good to have a selectman in your pocket. You know, that's something that we'll look to you, we'll look to the community for input. I mean, I look at it, you know, your first instinct, as town manager mentioned, you know, the lower dollar, you know, annually, monthly, kind of looks enticing. It's a lot of extra money, and it's a long debt. Do we want to be paying for this for 30 years? Because we know in our history that there's a constant reinvestment in our town needed. In any organization, any enterprise, you got to constantly reinvest in your capital. So do we want to be buried that long for that kind of debt? And do we want to spend that extra money? And do you want to be making that payment, you know, when I'm 82, do I still want to be making a payment on a building? You know, hopefully we're building one I'm 52. Probably not. But I think we need to talk about that as a community. I think we need some input from everybody, and I think we need to go into town meeting and understand where we want to go with it. So
That was kind of the direction I was going in, because this is a large project and it's going to cost a lot of money, regardless whether it's 20 or 30 years. And I think that it's important for people to understand what they're buying and what it's going to cost them.
exactly.
As they're making their decision. I think that's important.
Definitely is. Couldn't agree more. But again, we need input from everybody because it's a big decision. It's a huge decision. So we're open. We want to hear from folks. So, and I'm sure there'll be conflict on it, but that's okay.
That's a good thing, as long as it's up front and everybody understands. That's all that should matter.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Back to you.
Just a general question between the difference between the 20 and 30. Is there a potential for accelerated payments if you were to take a 30, like you can do on your mortgage and prepay?
Well, you can, usually bond issues will have a call.
Okay.
So you can write that in. You can make sure it has a call. They almost always have a call, which means typically not, they're used for refundings more than early payoffs, because that doesn't happen so much. But definitely with either a 20 or 30 year, we would want to make sure that there was a call provision in the event that interest rates change. I mean, they're very low right now. They will be higher when we permanently finance this, but there is always the opportunity that interest rates will become lower at some point in the future. So you want to build that in so that you're able to take advantage of a lower interest rate.
Well, I guess part of my question also just went to knowing that there is retiring debt, and which was one of the reasons why I was curious what the schedule would look like.
Yeah.
Would be whether or not the capacity to increase payments down the road would be.
Yeah, and we can talk about that. Any of the retiring exempt debt, for instance, I mean, we don't have the ability to continue that without a voter authorization. Any non-exempt debt, we could, in theory, put it towards repayment of this project. We've also talked about putting it towards towards roads. I'm sure there are other opinions on where that could be put towards other capital projects. And when you look at the non-exempt debt that's retiring, it is minuscule in comparison to what we're talking about.
Well, I guess actually It's more, not so much that we're putting more money towards it as much as I'm looking at my tax bill and I'm looking at it
You want to see
potentially
what
going
happens
down.
to it, right.
Right.
So,
Even though this is a big hit right up front.
yeah, so we can look at the pictures. If we go to the first page of the packet. This is a graph that shows all of our debt, exempt and non-exempt debt. And it's color-coded, and I printed it out in color. I almost never print out in color, but this one's a tough one if you don't. So we have lots of different types of debt, but the first category, the blue on the bottom, this is our regular non-exempt debt. This is the debt that's competing with the same dollar that goes towards funding the operating budget. And then the next category up, the maroon, is our sewer betterment debt, debt associated with sewer projects, but we use betterments that we collect as a source to repay that. And then next up, very small, identified as septic receipts. Again, this is where we have a dedicated source to pay back this debt. And then the next is water betterment, and that's the Meadowwoods water project. And then we get into the excluded debt, and that turquoise color, that is the excluded debt that you are paying out of your taxes are increased. That is the amount, and we can talk about what that is in a minute. But then the orange above that, that's also excluded debt, but that is paid for through the MSBA reimbursement. So it's really that the part of the graph that's that turquoise color, that's what your taxes are being raised in addition to cover that debt. And that is, if you go to the next page, this shows just the excluded debt. In that same turquoise color, you can see that about $850,000 in fiscal 15 will be raised to pay exempt debt. So about $850,000. And that is pretty steady. There's a dip in fiscal 18, and then a significant dip again in fiscal 24, and then that excluded debt is completely paid off in fiscal 26. And then from 26 to 29, which is represented on the graph, we just have that small amount of non-excluded debt that we will continue to pay. So if you, let's see, if we go to page 6, second to last page in this first, and I apologize, I had it in a different, I had the presentation in a different order in my head, and it seemed like that was the right way, and which didn't turn out to be the right way. But on this page, this shows a detail of all of our debt, fiscal 15 to 29, and you can see. So if you look fiscal 15, there's a line that says adjusted excludable debt, $849,531. And if you go down a couple of lines, you can see that $849,000 equates to $186.30 annually for the average household. So if you want to think in terms of what's going to be paid off over the next several years, that $186 for the average household. And we would be looking to add on, depending on if it's a 30-year, we'd be looking to add on here $526. And just the difference between the 526 and the, I think I said 535, is just going from, the average is 247 and I was showing 250 in the other.
Carrie, the first FY15,
Yep.
263, what's that?
So the way that we put the scenario together is we would be permanently financing in 2015, but probably later in the fiscal year, so we would only be making, you make 2 payments on bond issues. We were assuming we would only be making 1 based on when we finance the project. So the full impact of this under this scenario is 2016, but I think it's more likely that the full impact would be 2017.
Mm-hmm.
But again, we would still have that either 2016 or 17 through to 2026, when we were still paying off other projects that had been approved. That period of time would be the heaviest burden on the taxpayer for this project.
So, Carrie, given that there's an MSBA reimbursement, is it safe to assume that a good portion of that excludable debt is the primary school, and that would be dropping off in fiscal '24?
Yeah, the excludable debt right now is for the primary school, the library, and the public safety building.
Right.
Well, that answered all my questions. Thank you.
Any other questions on the debt issue, repayment schedule, whatnot?
Other than we don't have anything else big coming up, do we? No.
No comment. Great, thank you very much. And thanks to the School Building Committee and our partners in this program. Very informative presentation. We appreciate you taking the time to share that with us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
And I would just like to remind the public that we will be having the first of a couple of public forums Wednesday, October 30th, 7 p.m. at the Lunenburg High School Auditorium.
We meet in the school building.
I'm sorry, what did I say?
You meant the school building committee?
I meant the town of Lunenburg will be hosting a public forum on the school building project on October 30th.
Thank you.
Trying to get the whole town to come out, not just
We need a
just the
bigger
committee.
auditorium for that.
Great. Okay. Do we have any comments from the public, either on the school building project or on any other matters? Okay. I have the latest issue of the Beacon, if anyone's interested. I don't have any other communications. Anyone else have any general communications to share? Okay. Committee and department updates, capital planning.
We've begun meeting with the individual departments. We had our first session on Wednesday. We met with the chief of police. It went extremely well. And pretty much for the next 7 or 8 weeks, we're going to be meeting each week with one or more departments. So it's moving along well.
Great.
Building reuse. Our meeting was postponed due to a brief power outage on Monday.
Oh, yeah.
We will be meeting again 2 weeks from this past Monday, where everyone's spread out, gathering a lot of information, gathering a lot of data, talking to outside experts, and trying to get some good information that will eventually allow us to formulate our recommendation. It's progressing well.
Good. Thank you. Brian, library?
Several updates. As you know, the Friends have their annual book and bake sale. This year they raised $4,000. That's a Friends-related thing, but let's move on to the next item, which will help. They finalized the arrangements for the installation of a power assist front doors that they had asked for previously in some capital planning things. The Friends have kindly offered to pay for it, so they're having it done through the Friends. So it will not be a burden upon the tax base. The repainting of the building actually is already completed. They came in under estimate and were run more quickly, so they did a nice job. They've done some, you may have seen the article in the paper about the aquatic landscaping that was done. That's basically done. It's been raked, weeded, mulched, and everything's fixed up there, so. Let's see, is there anything else? I think that's about it for now.
Okay, thank you. Public safety, Jason?
I'll be visiting with the two chiefs, fire and police, next week. So nothing new to update there, other than, from what I'm hearing, everything's going relatively smooth with the regional dispatch transition, so. As far as sewer commission goes, I've met with them 3 times since I've met with the group here, the finance committee, getting familiar with the issues that they have in front of them and reviewing some of their legal issues that they were reviewing for some of the projects that are ongoing and some variances that have been requested on sewer fees and whatnot from different projects. But things seem to be going relatively well with that group. So I'm kind of just getting my feet wet with them. So hopefully we'll have some figures to share with you regarding the cost. I guess there's the sewer replacement project for the stuff on John Fitch, and some of our costs are being identified with that.
Okay, thank you. Council on Aging, Karen.
So they had their meeting this past Tuesday. The director wasn't there. She's planning on going over financials at the November meeting, although I'm not sure how that's going to work with school building is also going to be there, I guess, presenting as well. So hopefully we'll have some more information on that the next time. Do you want me to hit Monty Tech while I'm here?
Please.
Okay. So I did get a report or an update from our rep there. She said there's currently 70 students from Lunenburg, which brings the total enrollment at Monty Tech to 1431. They have one of their largest practical nursing programs this year with 40 students. They also voted to, or was approved to establish their stabilization funds through the majority votes at the member town meetings. They also, they have a library project. They did get a large grant that went towards updating their library, and they hired a librarian as well as an assistant librarian, and that should be finished at the end of October.
Great. And agriculture?
Haven't made one of their meetings yet. They appear to be plugging along.
Okay. And in terms of schools and school building, I just want to reiterate something I said earlier about the school building committee really closely examining all the costs associated with the project. We've actually established a subcommittee to take a closer look at the costs. I'm part of that subcommittee. We met this evening. Prior to this meeting, we'll be meeting again, I think in 2 weeks, to just continue to review the value engineering and the different options that we have to keep the costs of this project as tight as we can. Nothing else to report. Terry, Green Communities?
They've been very busy, actually. They did just present at the Board of Selectmen and got approval on one of the last steps that they have to go through to be applying for their green community status. And that was around a policy to replace vehicles that are not otherwise exempted with more efficient vehicles, fuel-efficient vehicles, which it sounds like there's only 4 in town that are not exempt because they're not fire trucks or ambulances or other type vehicles. They're also, what they're talking about is very similar to what we've been talking about in terms of, they're looking at the feasibility of bringing natural gas to the police station in terms of, trying to find their 20%, which is one of the things they're also trying to do is identify where they're going to find 20% in fuel savings over 5 years. And they want to start with, I'm now not remember if it was 3 or 5 years. I think it's 5 years. If the school project goes forward, they want to wait and start so that those numbers will be included in, because they're anticipating some fuel efficiencies. They're not sure about electric efficiencies. Evidently, the numbers they're getting from the contractors are, John Londa's having a little bit of trouble trying to reconcile. So, but in terms of the savings around heat, they're looking for some significant savings. And they're also looking at the potential for using grant funds once they do go through the application process for the green communities to do an assessment on use. Basically things that people have been talking about in this group. It's very similar to what the discussions are going on at green communities. And that's that.
Great, thank you. John, DPW?
DPW, last month, World Tech Engineering made a presentation in front of the Board of Selectmen regarding it called it asset management, but really zeroed in on street signs. There's a manual of uniform traffic control devices that's out there trying to get consistency. And with street signs throughout the country, I presume it's a subset of the National Highway Association. And they did, World Tech Engineering did a survey of the 938 or so signs we have in the town, and they found that some 7% complied. There was various degrees of out of compliance, non-standard size, obstructed, incorrect height, or tested for retroreflectivity, which is the reflective nature of these signs. And a large portion of our signs would need to be upgraded. Now, my understanding is that there's no set deadline for this, but we have to, as a town, demonstrate a good faith effort based on the based on the resources we have to bring to bear, that we are in fact trying to comply with these new standards. So, and I haven't yet talked to Jack Rodriguez about what he estimates that would cost. But when I do, I'll get back to you guys.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Can I ask a couple questions?
Sure.
So what are the ramifications of non-compliance?
They talked about torts, that if in fact, we didn't follow that, during the meeting I didn't follow that up too much, but we are liable for lawsuits if we don't make a good faith effort to comply. But I don't know what that means.
Okay. Second question, is there any source for funding this activity?
I don't know that either.
Okay.
Well, we'll get to that.
I mean, a source other than our taxpayers.
Yeah, no, exactly, yeah. No, I've got to talk to Jack about that issue.
Okay.
And public access cable was to have met last month, but did not. It was supposed canceled, so I'm still waiting to get the next meeting with them.
Okay, great. I do need a go back here on the communications. And I believe Kerry sent out a note this week. The Association of Town Finance Committees is having their annual meeting, and it is a week from Saturday, October 19th. It's at Tri-County Regional High School in Franklin. 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Not sure if anyone is interested in attending that. I've been to it in the past. I think others have. Brian's been to it. Terry, did you go last year? It's a series of seminars throughout the day. It's very useful, very informative, particularly for new members. And if anyone's interested to attend, Kerry can get you registered, or I have some information here if anyone's interested.
I'm going.
You are? Great.
Yep.
Wonderful. Okay. Kerry, do you have anything for us?
I just have a couple of items. I wanted to give you an update on health insurance. As you know, we negotiated with our Public Employee Committee to make some changes effective July 1st that had a significant positive impact to both the community and to employees. One of the changes that we made is we moved our retiree group over to all Medicare plans, or we moved the prescription drug benefit over to Medicare Part D rather than paying for that in-house. And we knew that we would achieve some decent savings, which we did. But those plans renew on a January 1st. Our regular health insurance renews on July 1st, and these ones are on January 1st. So I've just received the premiums that will go into effect for January 1st, 2014 for these plans. And we had a great renewal, and it looks like we will save an additional $50,000 for the half year that they will be in effect. I'm thrilled with that because our health insurance number that we appropriated was so tight. As a matter of fact, we had some increased enrollment as of July 1st, and my projection through the end of the year, no joke, was about $1,000 less than what we had appropriated, just because we had a few more people enroll. So this $50,000 certainly will be helpful, and I would expect if we continue with the same enrollment that we would have close to that in savings at the end of the year. So that is excellent. I think one of the best pieces of news to come out of that is we have a plan called MedX 3, which will now be MedX 2, and this is a health insurance plan for retirees age 65 and over, so not our early retirees. But this plan is particularly helpful for retirees that don't live in Massachusetts or in the New England area, or they live here and they spend half a year in Florida or someplace else where they need something that includes something broader than a Massachusetts or a New England network. We only had about an average of 7 retirees enrolled in that plan because it was so expensive. It was the renewal is about half of what we were paying in the previous year. So it's not a huge dollar savings for the town because we had such a low enrollment but for retirees who need that plan, they will be paying about half of what they were paying. So it's just really nice.
Is that a Medicare supplement plan, basically?
It is. All of our age 65 and over are Medicare supplement plans. And what we have to do is we have to make sure that we provide a plan between Medicare and the supplement that is equivalent to what we provide to early retirees or to active employees. The second item I wanted to give you an update on is solar farms. We have finally concluded our negotiations on these solar projects, on the 2 solar projects. And we have one developer buying the other developer out, so we have one developer building both of the projects. And I do expect within the next 30 to 45 days that the developer will be pulling building permits, at least on the Chase Road project, which is now the site of 100% of the municipal project, will be over on Chase Road. The developer needs to have the project substantially complete by December 31st of this year in order to take advantage of federal tax incentives. So the project will be substantially under construction in very short order and is supposed to be at commercial operation sometime in the spring. So it is likely that we will see some level of savings in the current fiscal year, which will be helpful. We didn't budget for anything. Any savings that we realize as a result of that project will be beneficial to the bottom line for fiscal 14. The project on West Street, Pleasant Street, that project over there will now be a private project. It will look the same, it will act the same, but it's a private project being built under the private cap, green energy cap. And that project, there is a power purchase agreement on that project with a private entity that is a conglomeration of industrial businesses who will purchase the credits from that project. And their businesses in this area, not necessarily just in Lunenburg, but in the north central Worcester County region. So that is nice that there'll be some private business benefit to the project. The Board of Selectmen chose not to negotiate a pilot agreement on that project because they felt that the authorization received from town meeting was that the project had to have a power purchase agreement that benefited the town. So because that is a private project, there will be no pilot at this point for that project. The developer, it was suggested to the developer that he may want to seek town meeting authorization for a pilot for that project. The pilot, in my opinion, is really more beneficial to the developer because it levels out the tax payment over the useful life of the project. So it really is more beneficial. The town is going to collect what the town is going to collect, whether we collect a lot up front and a little at the end. So it's really beneficial to the developer because to know what the annual payment will be. So that will be up to him whether or not he wants to pursue that. I think the end result is the project is, we calculated a pilot based on what we thought that the tax would be, increased at 2.5% per year, and then split it over the 20 years. So I think the payment that project makes will likely be pretty close to that $18,818 per megawatt, whether you call it a pilot or not, whether he's paying, $40,000 in the first year and $5,000 in the last year. I think the town will see the same.
Right. And what's the capacity of the Chase project, and where does that leave us in terms of the town's cap with Unitil?
The Chase Road project was approved by the planning board at 3.1 megawatts. And that's 3.1 AC. I hope I don't mix these up, but forgive me. There's AC and DC. In the way that we're always going back and forth at what we're looking at. But the planning board, I'm going to call it AC. So the planning board approved the project at 3.1 megawatts AC. The cap, the municipal cap that Unitil is required to offer is 3.0 DC, and there's a 20% difference. So the developer will build the full size of that project, the full approval, and we will be at 100% of that cap. between that project and the Turkey Hill Middle School, and I think there are a couple of very small other projects. So there won't be any capacity within the Unitil service territory for any other municipal projects. We are in the process of negotiating an intermunicipal agreement to resell some excess credits to the town of Townsend. The one interesting twist in having this project, because previously we were looking at two separate projects that were about 1 megawatt each. And Unitil does have the authority, instead of issuing credits, they can issue us essentially a rebate check, which is equal to the value of the credits. But what they told us was that they didn't have to do that for projects that were 1 megawatt or less. There's some provision. Now that this project is over 1 megawatt, it is possible that they may just issue us a rebate check for the credits. So if they do that, the town really doesn't have any need to sell excess credits. But we will continue looking at selling excess credits until we hear otherwise from Unitil. And I'm not sure what they will do, because I had forgotten about that, and John Londa actually just reminded me recently that that's something that we can look at as well.
Is that rebate option at their discretion?
Yes.
Okay.
It is.
And when do you expect a decision from them, or a decision, I guess it would be?
Well, I'm not sure. We need to formally ask that question again, and I'm pretty sure they have a legally specified timetable in which they have to provide us an answer. So the power purchase agreement that we have on this project will result in a 15% savings in electricity for the town. And then the third and last item I wanted to mention to you is give you an update on the Leominster Casino project. We had a pretty substantial discussion at the Board of Selectmen meeting on Tuesday night about this project. So just to give you a brief update, Leominster is one of 3 communities that is a potential host to a Category 2 slots parlor. There are 2 types of licenses that will be granted for gaming in the state of Massachusetts within the next year. The Category 1 is the full casino, and there are 3 different regions. There is Eastern Mass, the South Shore, and Western Mass. So no politics involved in how they came up with those 3 regions. So in Eastern Mass, there are, I can't remember how many, I think there are two applicants there in the Everett and Revere location. The South Shore, it's around the racetracks, Raynham, Taunton, that area. And then in Western Mass, Springfield, they're down to Springfield. And then these Category 2 licenses can be anywhere statewide. And as I mentioned, there are 3 applications currently in. There's Leominster, and then there are 2 in the South Shore. Taunton, Raynham, I can't remember where Plainville. The Category 2 licenses are currently under review, and the Gaming Commission will make a decision by December 31st on which one of the 3 they are going to authorize. The second phase of the application was due just last Friday, and so the Gaming Commission is really reviewing all of these right now. There are a lot of different opinions on who has the best chance. If you could talk to 3 people and come up with, at least 3 different opinions. I do think the Leominster project has a good shot, because if you just look at where there's going to be something that we're competing, or we're not, I'm not part of this. I get in the middle of everything. I'm not any part of this. I just get excited about different opportunities. The other two projects that the Leominster project is competing against are in the South Shore, and there's already going to be a casino down there. So some people think Leominster has a good shot because of that, because the Gaming Commission will want to spread these facilities out. But then there are other people who believe that this Category 2 license was specifically designed to stimulate the racetracks, and that it has to go there. So I'm not sure what's going to happen, but whatever is going to happen pretty fast. So Leominster, as the host community, had the opportunity to negotiate a host community agreement, which you may have read about, which provides a significant financial benefit to the town, to the city of Leominster, for hosting this project. Then there is a provision in the regulations that surrounding communities also need to have, or are encouraged to have, agreements negotiated with the developer to mitigate any impact of this proposal. And this is what is pretty interesting, because if there was any other development proposed at that location, if it was a retail mall, nobody would care what the town of Lunenburg thought, or any of the other communities. But because there are special provisions in the regulations that require the developer to pay attention to impacts to other communities. So we have had the opportunity to review the traffic impact study and the review of the peer reviewing engineer. We've actually sent the traffic impact study off to World Tech Engineering, who John just talked about, who is serving as our traffic consultant right now, to take a look at it to see if the assumptions that were made in that report are valid. And that process is underway right now. But what we have been told, and I think I got a preliminary report back from the traffic engineer, that it would be pretty hard for the town of Lunenburg to demonstrate any significant impact to the town because of this project. The one corridor that we are particularly interested in is Route 13. And the developer is projecting that about 100,000 people will be coming on an annual basis down that Route 13 corridor to get to this particular development. And that actually equates to, I think we figured it out, about 20 trips per hour. So if the impact really is 20 trips per hour down Route 13, I mean, 20 cars could go by you in 10 seconds, right? So that it would be very difficult for us, if that in fact is true, to demonstrate that that has a significant impact on the community, to the point that the developer has to provide mitigation. So we are looking at that, but I don't expect that we're going to be able to demonstrate anything. So we have a couple of different options. We can attempt to negotiate an agreement with the developer, or we could petition the Gaming Commission directly, and if we petition the Gaming Commission directly, we have to be able to demonstrate this impact that I think would be difficult. We've had a great deal of success in talking to this developer. Town council actually also serves as town council for the city of Leominster. So the attorney that we're working with in town council's office actually negotiated the host community agreement for the city of Leominster, has developed a relationship with this developer, and we've had, I think, much better success than at least one other surrounding community in meeting with the developer. What we have been told, we essentially have a month to negotiate a surrounding community agreement, and only because the Gaming Commission granted an extension that the town of Lunenburg requested, but actually granted this extension statewide. The surrounding community agreements were supposed to be in with the application that was due last Friday, but none of the surrounding communities for any of these projects had been able to negotiate an agreement, so the Gaming Commission gave a 1-month extension. We have a draft agreement. We have tentative agreement from the developer that he will designate Lunenburg as a surrounding community, even though he doesn't believe that we would meet the legal requirement because of the impact or lack of significant impact. But he would be willing to do this. We would be looking for some nominal payment on an annual basis. And right now we're looking at a couple of different things, but because we're negotiating, the terms aren't public, but they will become public soon enough. But the benefit to, or I think the main benefit to the town in being named a surrounding community is that we have the ability to apply for grant funding through the state, through the Gaming Commission in the future for mitigation projects. The state of Massachusetts has done quite a job in setting up these licenses. 49% of the gross gaming receipts from these casinos and the slot parlor will go to the state of Massachusetts. So that's pretty amazing. The developer is going to start at 51% of gross gaming revenues and then is giving to the host community, and then any other mitigation efforts. So this 49% will go to a variety of different things, but one item of particular interest is a community mitigation fund. 6.5% of, it's actually 6.5% of 40% of the tax. Now, the tax is split 40% and 9%, so 6.5% of the 40% tax will go into this community mitigation fund. And I believe that means that there'll be anywhere from $4.5 to $6 million annually in this fund that only host communities or designated surrounding communities can apply to for projects. So I think it's of benefit to the town of Lunenburg to be able to get that designation so that we have the opportunity to apply for those funds if there is some impact to the project that nobody anticipated, or somehow that it's drawing from different places and a lot more people are coming down from New Hampshire than originally projected. So I do think that is of benefit. The town of Lunenburg has no say whatsoever in whether this project gets approved or not. I've had a couple people call and let me know they don't want the project. I love talking to everybody in town, and please feel free to call, but one thing that we don't have a say in is whether or not the project goes forward. This is a project that is in Leominster, that the Leominster voters have approved, and it's up to the Gaming Commission right now to decide if the project goes in Leominster.
Potentially, couldn't there be some issues also on the Keating-Powell area with all the work that's going to be going on and the amount of truck traffic that's going to be going through that area for the entire construction time? Couldn't that potentially be another type of mitigation?
Yeah, it could, and that's definitely a corridor that we're interested in as well. But at this point, the developer has indicated that he doesn't believe that we qualify. So but he's willing to designate us. So if we wanted to really push the issue, we'd have to make a case to the Gaming Commission, and I just don't know that we have the ability to do that based on.
I agree with that. I mean,
yeah.
It's more in convincing the developer of its impact on the town.
Yeah, and the developer has been easy enough to work with. I mean, what he mentioned to me was they picked that location at Route 190 and 117 because they didn't believe that they would have to make infrastructure improvements over there, because that interchange was built for a regional mall that never materialized. This project, whoever wins this Category 2 license is required to spend $125 million in this development. And this project is a $200 million project with an estimated gross gaming receipts from this project of $200 to $300 million annually. I mean, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it is.
But the developer, this is a company, the company is called the Cordish Companies out of Maryland. I don't know if you've had the opportunity to look at any of their information on the website. They've done a number of projects in a number of states. They have a good reputation. They are a green builder. They are willing to have local preferences for employment and for vendors, including, I've mentioned this I don't know how many times, including produce. The project is going to have 3 restaurants, and they are looking to purchase produce locally, so I think that's of great benefit to the town of Lunenburg. I know everybody has farms, but we have the best farms, so hopefully they'll be purchasing, and the most, purchasing here. 600 permanent jobs associated with this project. We certainly could use jobs all across the spectrum, including things like human resources and IT and security, hospitality, in addition to any of what you would find at a casino. 600 construction, 600 to 700 construction jobs, and they would be looking locally for that as well. The project, assuming it is approved at the end of this calendar year, they believe there's about a 6 to 7 month time period to get through the permitting process, and then about 12 to 15 months in construction. So it's something that would move fairly quickly. The project also has a 300 to 400 seat amphitheater, which would be kind of a nice addition to this area. Maybe that would draw smaller concerts and that type of thing. So it is a nice project. They do have an office. I always want to call it Sears Town.
Mall at Whitney Field. Whitney Field.
Whitney Field. They have an office down there that's open during regular business hours, where you can go in and you can look at the different information they have on the project. It looks like a nice project, regardless of how you feel about casinos and gambling. It is a nice looking project.
Any other questions for Kerry on that? Or anything else? Thank you. Last time we got together, we worked on our fiscal policies. I did not put that on the agenda for this evening, knowing that we had the school building committee. I figured we'd have a pretty full evening with that. But I would like to get that on the agenda for next time. And I think we said capital was next up. And Steve, you were going to draft a first draft of that? No?
I wasn't aware of it, but I guess I've been designated.
Okay. I think that's what we said. Yeah. So if you could.
Yeah, actually, that was in the meeting minutes from the last meeting, yeah.
I was just looking at
That's where I got it.
Yeah.
Mark, could I also propose that we designate some time where we can talk about the school building project after we've had a chance to regurgitate all this information, and we can just...
Absolutely.
Perhaps then you'll be able to update us too on the other subcommittee you're working on as well.
We are scheduled to meet at 5 o'clock on the 24th.
Terrific.
So I will have some additional information. I'm not sure how much progress we'll make, but I may have something to share.
Good.
But I'll put it on the agenda regardless.
It may not be much, but it'll be fresh.
That's right. Okay. We do have a standing agenda item for budget opportunities. Do we have anything that we want to discuss tonight? Okay. So our next meeting will be October 24th, 7 o'clock p.m. right here at Town Hall. It's our regularly scheduled meeting, a couple of agenda items, the fiscal policies, and talk about the school building project. Okay?
Very good.
Not likely to be televised.
Not likely. Certainly can make arrangements for that if anyone feels it's appropriate.
Doesn't seem necessary at this time.
Okay. Anything else for this evening?
Move to adjourn?
Thank you.
Second.
Any discussion? Those in favor? Aye.
Aye.